The following program is a production of the Fairfax Network, Fairfax County Public Schools.
You're watching Meet the Author with James Riley.
Welcome to Meet the Author. I'm your host, Emily Godfrey. Joining me in the studio today is New York Times bestselling fantasy fiction author James Riley. Welcome, James.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Also joining us via Skype are students from Claremont Elementary School. Hello, Claremont.
Hello.
Hi. James is here today to talk about his fantasy fiction book series, which include Half Upon a Time and Story Thieves. His latest and final book in the Story Thieves series is Worlds Apart. James, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Story Thieves series?
Sure. So Story Thieves came about from, I love books. I've always loved books. My parents would let us stay up late at night if we were reading, and that was like the only way, so I read all the time. And something, for anyone who loves books, you've probably considered what it would be like to meet your favorite characters, maybe to join in their adventures and everything.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah, so I thought, what would happen if that was actually possible? So Story Thieves is about a girl named Bethany, and she's actually half fictional. Her father's a fictional character, and that's given her, and we'll get into that, but that's given her the power to be able to jump into books and join in the stories. Unfortunately, ever since her 4th birthday, when she had this power, but she was young and didn't really know how to use it, she had a birthday party, and her mom was like, nobody bring any books. She didn't say why, but she didn't want Bethany to kind of get into trouble. Unfortunately, someone brought a book, and Bethany ended up pulling the entire birthday party into that book with her, including her father. And everyone else made it back out with Bethany except for her father. And so ever since, she's felt really guilty about this for good reason.
Yeah.
And so she goes into the library every night and checks out a new book to try to find him. Unfortunately, one night she hasn't had a great day, so she's been kind of sitting around Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, as we would all probably do.
Yeah.
And the son of the librarian, who's one of her classmates named Owen, is putting back books for his mom because he's a good kid. And he's putting that book back in particular, and it like flops off the pile of books and lands on the floor, and Bethany's hand comes up out of the pages covered in chocolate.
Oh, wow.
And Owen sees this and is terrified. But as soon as he realizes what's happening and she explains her powers, he's like, this is the greatest thing ever. You can take me into my favorite series, which is a fantasy series called Kill No Foot, Magic Thief, which I totally ripped off Harry Potter to write on purpose because I love Harry Potter. So I was making all these kind of fun references to it. So they go into that book, bad things happen because it's a book, so we need some conflict and interesting things.
Just a little bit, right?
Yeah. Owen ends up getting trapped in the book and has to live out the Kill No Foot story. It's the 7th book in a series, and he has to end the series when things are going to get very dangerous for Kill No Foot. Whereas Kill No Foot, who's this boy magician, and his professor, who's named the Magister, both actually escape out of the book and go looking for their author to find out exactly what this whole fictional thing means and how a writer is telling them what to do. So it gets a little, it gets a little bit meta, but hopefully fun. And then every book in the Story Thieves series is like a different genre. The first one is, like I said, kind of fantasy. The second one is a mystery, and it involves all the different mystery kind of cliches and everything that I love about mysteries, all kind of mashed into one.
Yeah.
And it's called the Stolen Chapters because the first 9 chapters are all blacked out as you turn the pages. And a lot of people are like, I think I got a misprint. And it's like, no, we intended this. This is supposed to be, you'll find out what's happening in those chapters as you go.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Well, our Claremont students are eagerly awaiting a chance to ask you some questions.
Yes.
So let's take a few.
So it gets a little...
Who has the first question for author James Riley? Hi, what's your name and what's your question?
I'm Michaela. I'm Michaela.
Hi, Michaela. What's your question?
How did you develop your biography on your books, and why do you say you are fictional?
That's a great question. So the biographies of the Story Thieves series are a little strange. They say that James Riley doesn't exist, and if you ever see him in person, it's an actor playing the part. I did that because I thought it'd be funny, first of all, and it turns out I got so many questions about it that it probably wasn't a good idea. But because Story Thieves are the series are about like fictional characters meeting their author and everything, and there's a character in the series named Nobody, who is arranging a lot of these things that happen, and you'll see as you read what he's up to. But I wanted to kind of hint that maybe the person who's actually writing these stories was Nobody, the character, not me. So I kind of hinted that in my biography to kind of make you wonder where these books are coming from and who's writing them. And I thought it'd be fun, but I really do exist, I swear.
It's true. He's here with us right now. All right, Claremont, what is your name and what's your question?
Hi, my name is Sarah. What parts did you edit out of the Story Thieves series?
That's a great question. What parts did I edit out of Story Thieves? I haven't thought about this in a little while because I've been writing a new series, but there are always things that as you go, there are things that you might even love and you wish that you could let readers kind of experience, but sometimes they slow the plot down or they're just not necessary. It might just be like, oh, I could go explore this whole other book because they can jump into books. So I could send them into one of my favorite books, like the Chronicles of Narnia or the Lloyd Alexander books, which are called the Chronicles of Prydain, some of my favorite books. So that would be really fun to kind of have my characters explore that kind of thing, but it's not always advancing the story. And we want to keep you interested as you're reading and don't want to kind of let you get bored as you're kind of going off on these side adventures. So some of those things have to come out, unfortunately. I can't really think of anything in particular that I really wish had been in there, but maybe some stuff in Pick the Plot, which is actually, it's kind of a choose your own adventure. So you get to decide what happens to Owen, who's one of the main characters. He's stuck in this interactive book, actually in the past, in a time prison in like prehistoric times. So you can let him get eaten by dinosaurs and such. And I would encourage you to because it's fun. Because he'll always be okay when you turn back to the chapter before and get to choose again. So there were some things in there that I wanted to include. I wish I could have put zombies in there for some reason. I thought that would be fun. Unfortunately, no.
Well, we have one more question right now from Claremont. What is your question?
My name is Joanna, and my question is, how do you come up with such interesting acknowledgments and dedications?
So the acknowledgments are also something that I get a lot of questions about because they're written to be fun, because a lot of acknowledgments are just lists of people they want to acknowledge. They want to say thank you to your editor and your agent and your loved ones, your family, your friends, which is great because it's really nice when you're thanking all the people who helped you write that book. But I wanted to make mine a little more fun, so sometimes they are like fake little stories. Sometimes, like in the biography, I pretend that I'm not real. A lot of times I bring my editor in, and so people now know my editor, whose name is Lisa, because I make her so sort of tired of all my antics in the acknowledgments. So she showed up at an event of mine once, and people are like, "Editor Lisa, are you really that annoyed with him all the time?" And she's like, "No, I do like his books," but it was fun. And then the acknowledgments for Worlds Apart, which is the last book, it's me pitching her the whole series of Story Thieves, and then being like, I also have this other idea for a new series called Revenge of Magic. She's like, just go away and write it. I don't want to talk to you anymore. So it's really just designed to be fun, but still let me thank all the people who I really want to thank for helping.
It sounds like a very creative way to include all of those elements in the book.
I hope so, and hopefully it's fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Claremont. Those were great questions. We'll come back to you in a bit later in the show. Do you have a question for James Riley? Join the conversation. Jot down the information at the bottom of your screen. We welcome your calls and tweets. So the storyline in Story Thieves is very complex. There are like 2 parallel stories going at the same time. How did you keep everything straight?
That's a great question. I don't know that I always did. What you try to do is have them sort of kind of, like you were saying, they can be parallel, so they're leading toward the same thing. And a lot of my stories, even when they are going off in separate directions, they'll come back in the end. So it does get kind of difficult, and it involves like a lot of note-taking and kind of mapping out things. Pick the Plot, like I said, is an interactive book, so that one got really complicated. because you can decide to go, there's a choice you have right in the middle where you can go to the past or the future, and those lead to very different things that you find out in very different storylines. So first of all, I'd encourage you to read them both if you're reading the book, because you will find out different things about the series. But it did get a little complicated because they both had to end up in the exact same place at the end, because it still had to lead into book 5. So that was a lot of notes, and I drew out a whole map for my editor.
Did you use like a mind map? What kind of like structure did you use to?
I drew a lot of boxes with like each of the choices, and then I would have little lines leading from it. So they would go to choice A or B, and then that would go to choice C and D. So it got really complicated, but it was fun, and it was like a fun thing to try to do, and also it did let me be kind of mean to my characters.
Well, it seems like it's almost like a puzzle. Like,
yeah.
And that's really interesting too as a writer.
It makes for a challenge unlike anything else I've ever done, because most stories you write, you know, from A to B to C, they're very linear, and they advance straight forward in the plot. But this one, you can jump around, and you sometimes have to go backwards. I made the kids and the readers try to find out a code to help Owen escape from this prison. So you had to restart the book 3 different times just to get this code. So it was very complicated, but hopefully fun too, and they had to write it down. I wanted them to like enjoy what they were doing and feel like they were part of the story.
Yeah, that's a really cool aspect of that.
Yeah.
Well, we have some email questions for
cool.
you. This one is from Juliana. She writes, I love all of your books. How do you get your ideas?
That's a great question. Thank you for sending it in. I have no idea. I always make jokes when people ask this, and I'll be like, oh, I have this family of gnomes that live in my walls. I just feed them cookies, and they leave ideas for book series out every night. It's more like if you're trying to think of an idea, I like to encourage people to look around the world and just kind of ask themselves, what if things were different? What if instead of the sky being blue, it was like multicolored and changed every day? What would that lead to? What if instead of like adults being in charge, kids were in charge? What might go wrong? What might be better? I don't know.
Yeah.
They may not know how to run power plants. I don't know. So, but if you ask yourself like one small question, if things were different, what if the sun was like gray instead of yellow and very bright? That can lead to other questions. And then as you go, you can kind of find your story there. So
that's a great writing tip for kids, because it's something that you can start doing right now.
And daydreaming, not while you're in school, but daydreaming in general is a big part of that. It's just kind of like letting your thoughts kind of go off on their own and see where they lead. And if you find there's an idea that you can't stop thinking about, those are usually the ones that I come back to and write a book about.
Do you write them down? Like, do you have a notepad, a notebook filled with ideas?
I usually do it on a computer and send myself emails, because I have my phone at all times, but I don't have any paper anymore. So I have all these emails that are just like book idea, story idea.
Wow.
And I usually just writing them down means I'll remember them, because I never actually go back to them.
Mm-hmm.
But if I write it down, it kind of gets highlighted in my head somehow. And then it gets into your subconscious, and you kind of think about it over and over, like usually when you're falling asleep at the worst possible moment. And that's what I was saying. If it comes back over and over, and you're like, this is a fun idea, and
it's probably worth keeping.
Yeah, and if it's interesting to you, hopefully it'll be interesting to readers too.
Could you tell us a little bit about your Half Upon a Time series?
Sure. So I loved fairy tales growing up. I read the original stuff by the Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen, and then I also am a huge Disney animation fan. So I wanted to take like all my favorite parts of every fairy tale I could think of and kind of mush them together. But I also thought it'd be fun to sort of look at some stories that everyone knows and kind of tweak them. So maybe there could be some twists and surprises they didn't see coming. So when I did a story about the big bad wolf, I also made him the Beast from Beauty and the Beast, because it sort of made sense that this giant wolf could also be sort of this brutish character who maybe had some backstory about the fact that he was in love with this woman. It didn't really work out in the Beauty and the Beast part, so he goes after some pigs. It makes sense in the story. So there were a lot of fun things like that. And I got to really just play around with a lot of like my favorite toys almost from childhood, which was all these fairy tales. So it was a lot of fun to do.
Was it hard to match up the fairy tales, like the characters, and figure out how they'd all fit together?
It wasn't as bad as I thought. It was more like I wanted to include so many more fairy tales than I could. So I had to like, some of it I got away with by like cutting, by merging them together, but a lot of them I had to leave out, and I wish I could have kept going. but I ran out of story. And a lot of kids will ask, like, when are you going to go back to that? And I'm like, I wish I could, but I don't have any more story for those characters. And if I wrote more, it would put them, like, there's an ending. We won't say if it's happy or not, but like, I would have to change that. And then everyone who liked the ending would sort of be like, what did you do?
Well, let's go to another email question. This one says, how do you feel when you walk around and everyone recognizes you?
I don't know. I've never had that happen.
What?
The fun thing is when you go to visit schools and everything, that can actually happen because kids are the ones who might recognize you from your book. But it's fun to be an author because we get to be the kind of people who can write books and really like bring a story to life in the mind of a reader. But we also don't have to deal with any of the awful parts about being famous where everyone recognizes you or anything like that. Like Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, sure, people might recognize them, but a lot of authors you see like on the back of their book and that's it. You don't see them in movies and stuff. So it's nice, even when people like your books, that they usually won't recognize you. So you're like, you can listen in when you're at bookstores and people will be like, oh, I love that book. And you're like, oh, interesting. That's good to hear.
So people should look out when they're at like a bookstore to see if you're standing right behind your books.
Yeah, if you're just standing there being like, oh, I hear these books are really good, and people are like, what is that guy doing?
Well, have you ever wanted to jump into your favorite book like Owen and Story Thieves? Well, students at Claremont Elementary did just that as they creatively explained the finer points of James Riley's fantasy fiction. Let's take a look.
Take the plunge and dive deep into your favorite book. That's what fourth graders are doing at Claremont Elementary as they explore the fantasy fiction of James Riley. Sharing their discoveries with classmates, students identify key attributes of characters.
Brave, strange, adventurous, unsanitary, disturbing.
Details of far-off places and the drama of colliding worlds.
This is my diorama of Story Thieves, the scene where the two dragons come out from their books. Keel and Bethany are trying to stop them.
Choosing the right book is important to all readers. For these students, choosing the right project to share their ideas about a book is also important.
I've been reading Half Upon a Time by James Riley, and I made a t-shirt project for it.
The title of my magazine is called Reading Weekly. For Story Thieves, it's the scene when Bethany first meets Owen and she jumps him into a book. Story Thieves is about a girl named Bethany who can jump in and out of books. One day when her classmate Owen is putting books away, he sees Bethany's hand coming out of a book.
This is my James Riley project. I read the book Half Upon a Time. I tried to bring the cover to life. This is Jack, May, and Phil, the prince. Now they're all climbing up the beanstalk. Jack's foot got caught. And this is my project.
So go ahead, take the plunge, and dive deep into a story. The discoveries will take your breath away.
Don't go away. Meet the author with James Riley. We'll be right back.
Those projects were amazing.
Those were so impressive. Thank you for showing those to us.
Yeah, I thought they were very cool. So based on your experience as a writer, why do you think that fantasy fiction resonates so much with young readers?
That's a great question. So personally, I love fantasy because it's like the idea that magic can happen right outside your front door. It doesn't have to happen in some, well, it can happen in some faraway land. But the kind of fantasy I tend to write is like fantasy where magic really can happen in the real world, or there's like a connection that you can go visit a different fantasy world. And there's something about magic that's just so amazing because it does mean that like anything you imagine can probably happen. So it creates all these possibilities and you're never sort of out of hope because there's always some way to find magic in your life. So yeah, I think fantasy kind of gives us that reminder that there's whatever we want to do, we can. It's like there are infinite possibilities.
Well, speaking of magic, we're going to go back to our Claremont students now because they have a few questions about your new book series, The Revenge of Magic.
Sure.
Go ahead, Claremont. We're ready for you.
It's like fantasy where magic.
What is your question?
My name is Natalie. My question is, what is your new book series, The Revenge of Magic, about?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. So my new series, like you said, is called The Revenge of Magic, and it's about what would happen if magic actually came back to the real world. So in the story, 13 years ago, all around the world, these skeletons were dug up that look like dinosaurs, but it turns out they have wings, and it turns out they're the skeletons of dragons. And each one has like a person riding on them holding a book of magic. And it turns out these books actually work. The spells within them work, but only for people born on that day or after, which means 13-year-old kids or under. So congratulations, any of you who are probably watching this can use magic in this world, and no adults can. So I thought it'd be fun to do like a school for magic where anyone born after that day can use it, but the adults have no idea what they're doing. They don't know how to use the magic, and they're still trying to teach these kids. So it's a school run by the government, and they have like soldiers who are watching the kids, because when kids can like shoot fireballs and stuff, that can be a little dangerous. So they have like soldiers watching over it. And the book actually starts with this giant monster attacking Washington, D.C., and that's how most of the world finds out that magic has come back, because this is like something that everyone sees. And the main character is in D.C. at that moment. He's just randomly there with his father, and his father gets taken by the monster and pulled back down below the earth. So our main character, his name is Fort, ends up going to the school to try to like get revenge about for his father, and he wants to learn magic for that reason. And as it goes, he learns that maybe revenge isn't the best way to be.
Maybe not the best idea.
Yeah, there might be better ways to deal with things.
Well, we have another question from Claremont. Hi, what is your question?
My name is Bryn, and my question is, why do you write so many books about magic? Why does magic interest you?
I just love magic. I love the idea that like anything you think of can be real. It does really kind of lead you to just hope and like possibility and imagination. Like magic isn't restricted by anything in the real world. You can do anything that you can possibly imagine. And I feel like our imaginations are so important. Just they allow us to like evolve and become better people. They don't let us get stuck by like what's actually happening. We can imagine better worlds, and we can kind of make those come about. And I feel like magic is a great way to think about that. That's what can lead us to those better worlds. So it's fun to write books about.
We have one more question from Claremont right now. Hi, 2 more questions.
Okay.
What is your name?
My name is Cassidy, and my question is, what is your favorite childhood book?
Ooh, good question. I have a bunch, and some of them are out of print right now because I'm old. But one I love to recommend is it's a series by an author named Lloyd Alexander, and it's the book series called The Chronicles of Prydain. And the first book is called The Book of Three, and it's about an assistant pig keeper. So he's not even like the head pig keeper. He's like the assistant pig keeper, but his pig can tell the future, which is like the greatest concept for a book ever, because everyone wants his pig so they can find out what's going to happen in this world, and he has to protect that pig from this king who's named the Horned King because he has horns. And it's just a great series, and you'll love it, and it's going to be made into a live-action series, movie series soon, so if you read it now, you can spoil it for all your friends, so it's a perfect time.
And our final question from Claremont right now. Hi, what's your question?
Hi, my name's Lily. What's your favorite underappreciated novel?
Favorite underappreciated novel? That's a great question. A lot of the books I love are sort of, they're classics because they are appreciated. But if you haven't read it, you should read The Phantom Tollbooth, because it has the greatest puns you'll ever see. And by greatest, I mean the worst. But that's the best part about puns, is they're hilarious even when they're terrible. And I actually did a little bit of the same kind of thing in my last book, Worlds Apart. I loved that book so much that I wanted to kind of create a world that was based on puns. So it's not really underappreciated, but if you haven't read it, you should read it because it's amazing.
Well, thank you, Claremont. Those were awesome questions. James, some students at Claremont gave up outdoor recess in order to read books.
What?
Your books.
That's incredible.
Those students make up the Claremont Lunch Bunch. The students gave up some recess time to form a book club. Their most recent topic of discussion was books by James Riley. Let's see if he makes the grade.
I really like the Story Thieves book, Pick the Plot, because it was a really clever way of writing because the story followed a specific plot line, but you still had freedom in choosing what you wanted the characters to do, and I thought that was really cool.
In Story Thieves, I really liked how James Riley made you second guess some ordinary things in life, like reading.
I like the way James Riley writes because it's kind of like the Percy Jackson series, how he makes the characters funny and yet the story's serious, and he also makes them sarcastic, which makes everybody laugh.
I really enjoyed the first book of Story Thieves. I also felt like I should be adventurous and try the second book, but it was kind of confusing towards the middle, but finally when I reached the end, the mystery had gone away and I completely understood it and liked it.
Usually I'm not a big fan of fantasy, but this book was really good.
And thank you, James Riley, for all the good books you have given us.
They had some amazing insights, right, into your books.
That was really nice of them.
Were you nervous about what they might say?
Oh yeah, it's terrifying because kids are very honest and they will say whatever they think. You get some blunt reactions sometimes.
So we're almost out of time, so we're going to give our last questions to the Claremont students.
Okay.
So Claremont, what is your question?
What could you have done as a teenager to become a better writer?
Oh, great question. I do a lot of school visits, so I get to talk to a lot of kids who do want to become writers. And I didn't really go about it the best way, I don't think. I used to write a lot of stories, but I never showed them to anyone. I was just writing them for my own enjoyment, which is great. But it's hard to get better if no one's kind of giving you any feedback about it. And that is really hard to have to like show your story to someone and let them be honest about it, because it can be, it can hurt if they're not a big fan of it. But that's also a way to get better, is to let them give you suggestions and to say, oh, this didn't make sense, or this I really loved. So one way that you can get better is by writing a lot, like writing as much as possible, because just like doing anything else, like playing a sport or learning a musical instrument, the more you write, the better you'll get. But also to kind of be brave and show it to somebody else and take whatever they say and try not to be offended by it, but like take it to heart and listen to what they're saying. And not everyone might have the same suggestions. Some people might like something and some people might not, and that's okay because everyone's different. But if everyone has like the same kind of suggestions, that's how you know that maybe something is a place that you can improve on. So it can help you get better.
And we have one final question from Claremont. Hi, what's your question?
My name is Juliana, and my question is, if you could give some advice to a younger person who wants to be a writer, what would you say?
I would say to both read as much as you can, because everyone likes to read for fun, but if you're going to be a writer, one of the easiest ways to figure out how to get better is to read a lot. And it doesn't matter if you like the book or not. You can take a book that you maybe don't really like and ask yourself how you would change it. Or if you have a book that you love, you can kind of take it apart a little bit and see like what makes you really love those characters, or what really is intriguing about the plot. You can kind of look at it and say, oh, this is what the author did here. So it really helps to read as much as you can. And then like I was saying, the more you write, the better you'll get, even if you're not kind of showing anybody, which does help too. But like just practice as much as you can, because you'll find yourself getting better the more you do it.
Well, thank you so much, Claremont. Those were awesome questions. Bye. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you, James. It was wonderful chatting with you today about your books.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, it was great. If you would like to learn more about James Riley, visit his website. To learn more about our upcoming programs, visit the Fairfax Network. For the Fairfax Network, I'm Emily Godfrey. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep dreaming. Thanks for watching.